Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about a new inclusion in the patch notes that might be pretty hype for spell totems, and also a little bit about this hype surrounding spell totems right now. I had an interesting encounter with Steel Mage and Ziz yesterday, had a really good talk over there, but there's quite a few people who are right now campaigning for spell totems to get pre-nerfed, especially the mana cost part, and I feel like this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how spells work right now. So I want to address that real quick. And obviously also this weird hype culture, which every creator kind of plays into because we're enthusiastic about our builds. But then there's usually other people who claim that the builds are S tier or whatever, or need to get nerfed. And now you're in this weird situation where your build is either going to get nerfed to shreds, whereas it wouldn't even have needed, right? Stuff like Snipe and Twisters are still going to be out there. They're going to be even more OP than spell totems, even if they work perfectly. But then on the other hand, you have the other downside, which is if you don't get nerfed, now the expectations are just through the roof and completely unrealistic set by other people. Now, the line people are referring to here is on Ancestral Bond, which has no cost attached, right? So you could use it with Archmage and not have a downside of Archmage. But I will be talking about spellcasters here in general, and I'm going to draw a comparison why this is actually necessary for this build to thrive whatsoever. And it's not going to, even then, right, it's not going to be as OP as some of the attack-based builds, but it is just necessary in order to even be a valid build. Here are the facts, and if you've played a spellcaster from no currency to mid-tier gear before, you know this to be true. Spellcasters without another scaling vector are mid to bad. At least if you've ever played an attack-based character before, you know exactly what I mean. That means you need some kind of sell, right? You need to be a life stacker, Archmage with mana, cast on crit with one of the above, or something according to Infusion Stormweaver. Now let's check these for totems. Totems cannot use cast on crit. In fact, they also cannot use infusion because they cannot build energy, and the skills that are on your totems also cannot use any infusion, so you can't do any Stormweaver tech or anything like that. Archmage, right now, alongside Lifestacker, are the only ways to really play it. So if you take away Archmage, and you're kind of left with Lifestacker in like hyper endgame with Wrathpith Globe, that is going to spell disaster. If totems have to pay a cost though, they don't have a way to leech it back or get mana or life on kill because totems cannot use on kill effects because they're not you. And they even understood this when they released plants because they made this keystone, which is honestly a joke power-wise. It's like 50% more damage, 50% less cost for a node. The duration is basically irrelevant. So yeah, that's also just like a quickie fix. And even those builds in endgame went for a lot for life stacker or mana stacker. Now compare that to attack-based builds, especially the ones running around right now. Let's think about a bow build, for example, which has the most normal-ass gear imaginable. This is literally just rare gear. It doesn't have to have a theme. It just stacks infinite flat damage on gear. And here's the problem, right? Spellcasters do not have these rules. Spellcasters cannot get 100 flat on gloves, 120 flat or more on rings. They do not have that opportunity. Meaning that if you release a spell-based skill that cannot do any of the above, it is dead on arrival. Especially with the downsides that totems have already inbuilt. Once again, they cannot use cast on crit or other meta skills. No mana life on kill at all. No on-kill effects in general here, which also includes Onslaught and the passive tree. If you look at the passive tree, there is a ton of nodes that are on crit recently. So for example, this one, if you have like all of these things do not work with totems, you would actually have to hit yourself anyways. You don't get mana remnants on kill, you only get the ones on crit, and you also have most of all delayed damage. So there is a threshold as to how fast you can actually get. And on top of that, Ancestral Bond takes all your spirit regardless. So GG can do whatever they want, but I at least hope that somebody at GG put this in for a reason and understands all of this, because right now spellcasters are in that kind of situation where you need some form of upper scaling. Now let's talk about a really cool inclusion in the patch notes though, because if you didn't know, Spell Cascade used to not work on totems. You couldn't even put it into the support slot, but now you can. So what does that open up? Well, if you look up Spell Cascade on PoE2DB, you will see that there's only a very select bit of skills that you can actually use it with, and a lot of them are already discarded because you cannot use infusions, for example, Firestorm, and they also have a maximum, and if you don't know, if a skill has a maximum, that is not per totem, that is global. So those skills are usually pretty damn bad, but Bone Cage is quite interesting. That is probably my favorite one, and there's also Comet. Now, the biggest problem with Comet most likely is that it's just too slow. And once again, you cannot use the fire infusion, so no living bomb tech or anything like that for double damage. But it is just too slow. If you're actually casting it and you don't put it on your cast on crit, it has a 2-second wind-up time, 1 second of which cannot even be scaled by cast speed. Put that on top of the already delayed damage from totems, and you got an issue. Now, Bone Cage, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Now, if you don't know, Bone Cage is technically a pretty strong skill. People have been self-casting it, and it has some big advantages. It does have a 1-second cast time, but it also has a 15 crit to boot. So that obviously makes it less interesting on Blood Mage because it already has that 15. But on something like Infernalist, really cool. Pins enemies, which is already defensively really strong. It is full fizz, and it deals a ton of damage to boot. A lot more than, for example, Spark. But it only hits around 2 times each. The way this works is with Spell Cascade, it doesn't just form a ring like it would here in the video. It will actually form multiple rings around it, and you can hit multiple times on the same target. Do note though that Spell Cascade support comes with a whopping 30% less damage, so that is still pretty big. Now, community member Aral Misti has been testing this one. We've tested it on stream, but he has a way nicer and cleaner clip right here, because one of the things we were worried about is Bone Cage resummons whenever you raise it again. So the problem was maybe the totems would reset each other, but this is not a limit skill, so it does not work like that. Each totem has its individual cast, and they can actually coexist, and you can see that pretty nicely in this video right here. When he puts down multiple totems, you can see that they're both up simultaneously right about now. You can see there's one here without unsummoning each other. There is, however, a few issues here because you cannot really use more than one spell totem. One spell totems people are talking about, which would fit very well with Bone Cage, is Bone Storm totems, which Tati played last patch. Unfortunately, it is not very good for clear. It is just a little bit too slow. I'll link this video down below in the description, and it just, yeah, it has a charge up time, and it just does not clear as well. You have to often wait for packs to die. So it is decent, but not great. And I say Bone Storm because Bone Cage doesn't really have that much single target damage. It's okay for single target, but it's really nothing to write home about. And the issue here is that with this whole archetype, you cannot use more than one spell totem, in case you're not aware. A lot of people aren't, from what I've read on the internet. Now, you can only put in one spell totem. So if you actually wanted to have a different skill for single target, you would not only have to sub out your main gem at every boss, you would also have to sub out the appropriate supports, which is not how I personally would like to play the game. So that is a huge issue that has always been the thing. Also with Ancestral Protector multiple times, you would have to gem swap. The other alternative is you would have to hybrid self-cast and totems, which is definitely fine for early game, but end game, once you want to specialize into totems completely, it's a little bit harder to do. And it also doesn't have a lightning base for Archmage, which is not that big of a deal. Usually if you go Archmage, you will have, I don't know, 80% of your damage or more will be Archmage, but it's still a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, I will be keeping an eye out on Bone Cage. It is pretty much impossible to test right now, like a lot of this stuff. So if I put out a video about the build, it will be obviously untested, so it will be mostly leveling related. And if you're not into test out stuff in week 1, I totally get that. Play one of the safer options. But for me personally, if this doesn't get nerfed before league start, I want to explore the archetype a lot more. It seems quite interesting. But with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.